speaking of wild world, can you imagine being back in college and trying to land and successfully landing some NIL deals like these guys are landing right now?
Yeah. I actually get asked that question quite a bit. And I think, can you hear me still?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. I was getting a phone call. I was making sure my headphones weren't going there. So I think it's just interesting. I get asked that question a lot. And I actually don't think for me it would have been that different, especially over the first 3 years. But, I may have done well with like the Keebler elves or the Keebler cookies. I would have crushed that. But what a world this is, man. I mean, people are just, and I guess my biggest problem, I don't understand the return on investment that you get. Like, how much money you have to just throw money at an 18-year-old kid and hope it works. Like if you're investing, like we're talking about real estate, if you invest in a building or a house, at least you have something. I mean, you're just throwing your money at air, I guess. I don't know. It's gotten extremely out of control. I know that.
Well, and there's some we know about, some we don't. Like the ones with IU, they don't announce those. But I assure you, there's some big numbers for some of the players, large numbers.
Oh yeah,
six-figure numbers. There are some players that are six figures. Trust me. But to me, I think that's going to finally help propel IU basketball back to being IU basketball. But I think it's going to really, really put a foot on Indiana football's throat.
Yeah, and that certainly isn't just an Indiana problem. I think it's you inevitably create a super league because you just can't compete. It's no longer about, well, I like this coach or I like this campus or I can play here early or all the things that recruiting used to be, right? There's no more selling. There's buying. It's all buying. I have $500,000 in a new car, and you get to come live. I mean, I'm born University of Miami fan. That's where my dad grew up. So they're getting a lot of attention right now for all the money that's being thrown around there. And I mean, yeah, how is a team like Indiana or, gosh, a ton of teams, even somebody like Iowa, that I think Iowa has obviously a better tradition than Indiana over however long, but it's hard to recruit against Southern Florida with $500,000. I just don't understand, and it goes back to I don't understand what the return on investment is, and I also don't understand how to control it. It was no surprise to me that Mark Emmert was stepping down, the NCAA president. God, what a nightmare that must be.
12 years of him, the Muppet. I call him Muppet Mark. It was like he was like one of those two old men's on the Muppets. If you ever remember that, that's what he reminded me of. And yeah, they're just like I've been saying, they're behind. It's so screwed up. It's as the Wild West, as we all call it. But now we know it's there, but what can be done to try to harness this? The Texas A&M apparently has like $25 million stockpiled in
I think it's a little more than that. I think it's a little more than that.
See, there you go. Yeah. I mean, Indiana basketball may even. I mean, how I don't know how a Nigel Pack lands an $800,000 deal like that. I just don't see, like you said, I don't see where the return on investment is for Miami for that. He has what, 2 seasons or once? It's 2 seasons. So because it's $400,000 a year. But they're winning. They had a great run, but winning's winning.
Yeah, it just doesn't. From Nigel Pack's perspective, I mean, you're stealing money. That's highway robbery. I don't even know. I'm sure he's a good player. You can't give that much money.
He was great.
Yeah, you can't give that much money to LeBron James. in college.
Well, what does that do to other schools? Now the pressure that puts on schools like in Indiana, or it doesn't have to be Indiana, anybody. You start setting the bars of cost and prices, basically. Is the cost for a good point guard now? Is that what it is? $800,000 over 2 years in a car? I mean, is that the going rate now?
I think one of the more underappreciated issues, at least with the conversations that I'm having, is what impact that has, especially on a basketball team with the eighth man. Like, you've got a guy that just transfers in, has over $750,000. You've been there for 3 years, 4 years, even struggling, grinding, trying to get on the floor even for 5 minutes. And now all of a sudden this dude just comes in with all this money in a brand new car from a booster of the school that you committed to out of college or out of high school, that you decided that's where you wanted to go. And you have to start treating this like it's the NBA or the NFL. And how does this kid go to class? How does Nigel Pack? I mean, for what? A kid's walking to go to business class, and Nigel Pack is got to go to the bank. Like, what are we talking about? I don't know. It opened slowly, and then it just ripped off, didn't it, man? Jeez.
Well, I keep saying this is no different than everyday life now. This is just like a job anywhere else. And getting back to the point of like what you just talked about, I'm going to take the other side only because of being pragmatic and say, you know what? Tough cookies, man. It's life. It's just like being at a job that you've been there for 3 years, and man, you really want this position, and someone from outside applies for it, and they have a little bit better credentials, and they get it. So it's there's no difference in life. It's getting people used to things just sooner than they were having to do it before, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's business. It's no longer, and I think the reason that we all love college sports is because it really is about the name on the front. It always was. And that's like, I mean, I'm sure people were getting paid before this, but just the kind of ruse that it wasn't happening, and they were really just excited to be at the school they were at, and whether they were transferring and doing all it was just a different feel when you watch the game. And now especially because everything's leaked and all these guys and all the numbers that they're getting, it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel the same. I've honestly kind of tuned it out. I used to be that's one of me and my dad's favorite things to do is in the off season talk about recruiting and how getting excited for the next season. It's just been different. It just isn't. It isn't what it used to be, and that's okay. We just all kind of have to adopt, right?
And it's never going to be. And that's the thing that I think people just have to understand. Yeah, you're going to have to go through the change because it's not going anywhere but forward and different. I mean, I don't know the changes that are going to be made at the NCAA, but obviously they're going to have to be major changes. They fire Mark Emmert. Finally, I don't know what the hell they were waiting on. I mean, he's been such it makes me he always made me want to pull my hair out. And I'm like, I didn't understand how you could be that moronic with the decisions they would make. And the NCAA itself was its own worst enemy. I talked earlier about the story of Bryant Fitzgerald, who lost an entire freaking season because of a clerical error. How in the hell does that have anything to do with what you're doing? It is the most Hippocratic crap I've ever heard of. And the NCAA, they were a behemoth, making all that money, having all that control, and they were unchecked. And the schools are just as guilty though, because Mark Emmert was their puppet.
Yeah, it's just, it seems like the fan was, the stuff was hitting the fan, but it wasn't a lot. And now it's just been an entire load and no one has any idea what to do. It's exploded. Boosters don't care who they give money to. I mean, the Texas thing, I think, is the most ridiculous part of all of it. I mean,
the
that's just a school
lineman.
That's just a school paying the player. I don't know how we've gone away from the name, image, and likeness and using, my face to promote the sandwich shop on the corner to the school just writing a check to you. I mean, what did it take? 3 years? It's just paying players. They're the San Diego Chargers. I don't understand. I don't understand how.
What's it going to be like?
I don't know.
What is college football going to be like now for the Alabamas, the Texas A&Ms, Ohio State, those programs that are the behemoths? There's going to have to be a separation. There is no way that you can continue to have those schools knowingly that they've got just millions of dollars in NIL funds. And that is the fact, people. They were already, the SEC was the biggest, cheatingest bunch of schools ever. Always been paying players all along. If you think that's not, you're nuts. But so what do you think it's going to be like now that they can do it up front? So I just think there's going to become a superpowers between those programs that already have that tradition and that rabid fan base. But then you look at a Nebraska, they're not. Do they have the money? Can they come up with the money? Do they have the fan base that can provide that kind of NIL money? Because that's, to me, that's an opportunity for Nebraska to get back to being Nebraska, and it's probably going to take that.
Yeah, I think the hard part there is, this is no disrespect to Nebraska, right? I grew up in Indiana. It's the same thing. But who wants to go live in Nebraska? Like, okay, you have $1 million. You still live in Nebraska.
Hey,
all of it's going to
– my buddy Pete, everybody, and our listeners in the UP, I don't want to live up north either.
100%.
Because I don't like being cold all the time. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You don't have humidity. It has great things up there. I just don't want to, I like to go visit. I don't
exactly. And everybody has their own taste, right? They're going to get the kid that wants to go there, and that's great. But there's just not the balance of power will shift so much. There absolutely has to be a separation, especially in football, right? Football is
basketball's fine. Basketball you can leave alone. I mean, and if you want any more indication of that, look at the Peacocks this year. I mean, basketball's fine.
Can make leave it alone. There's so much that can happen in a basketball game because there's so much ebb and flow, and it's a physical game, and it's
a one game, and especially in a one-time deal.
Anybody can beat anybody, and not often. And obviously the top will continue to separate from the bottom at a quick rate, a fast rate, but it's not as substantial and as prevalent as it would be in football, because having 5 humongous interior linemen or offensive linemen and 4 defensive linemen that can just dominate the game, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, Georgia was so good because of their front 4 and then their linebackers, and add in that they have unbelievable defensive backs in the backfield. I mean, that you just continue to reload those guys. They're just playing a different game. It's not the same, and there has to be something that's done. If go back to kind of the old ways, something has to be done. But maybe this is the best course of action, and FCS becomes kind of everybody that was left behind.
I'm thinking soccer. If you know much about soccer, they have the Premier and the Champions League, which it took me a long time to learn and understand that. But the Premier League is
you still don't. You still said it wrong.
The Premier League and the Championship. I know what you were talking about.
What is it?
But the Premier.
We talked about this with Mike DeCourcy. The Champions League is a totally separate tournament that encompasses all of Europe.
The biggest teams in Europe.
The Premier League is just England.
Yeah.
And then the Championship is the second level of England.
There's all kinds of levels. It's fine. I get it. I knew what you were saying. No worries.
Which one is the biggest one of that?
The Premier League.
That's what I thought. Okay. I think that we're going to end up with the Premier League in college football.
Yeah, it's kind of what Europe was
and
trying
maybe
to do
a Champions League, and possibility where you get what's it called when you get downgraded,
relegation and promotion.
Relegation. Could we see that where you get relegated somehow?
That's an awesome concept, but the problem is you've got 125 teams versus, I think they have like 50 or 60, but it is cool. And the way they do it with the point system, and you got to be in a certain threshold of points and the lowest tiers, and then you have the playoff. It's an awesome concept. I just don't know
how to implement it, how it could be implemented.
Yeah, and I guess the problem is if you're one of the top teams, and I'm going to preface what I'm about to say. Everybody wants to compete at the highest level if you ask me. That's what I believe. But if you're a top team in Division 2, do you even want to go to Division 1? Like, okay, you can try to recruit, but it's still all about money. You're not just going to get gifted $50 million. You still have the same budget with your alumni and donors that you had before. And now instead of competing with people that are similar or a little bit below where you are, now you're competing against Texas A&M that reloads $75 million every year. But I think I saw a good point here as I'm looking at the comments by Tony at 10:03, Tony Stuckey. The money is always going to be king, and it makes sense now. Like, everyone's jumping in, right? They want their teams to be good, but I don't care if you have $500 million in the bank. If you throw $1 million at something and you get $0 back, that's a bad feeling. If you throw $10 at something and get nothing in return, that's a bad feeling. So eventually, these billionaire guys will be like, okay, we need to slow our roll. This is not sustainable, what we're doing. I apologize if you can hear that banging. They're redoing the carpet. But it's not sustainable in that. So hopefully it'll rein itself in a little, but that was a long way of saying that this is what a wild ride we're on.